Welcome to the deep dive. Let's just unpack a universal career fantasy for a second. You know the one.
Oh, absolutely.
You just landed this high-paying, highly flexible role at a prestigious foreign multinational corporation.
The absolute dream job.
Right. You've got the impressive title, the elite benefits, and the salary that finally makes all your previous late nights feel justified.
On paper, you are totally living the dream.
Yeah, on paper. But today, we're looking at a stack of source material that well, it completely dismantles that glamorous facade.
It really does.
Our mission for this deep dive is to look past that glossy branding of foreign multinationals. We want to uncover the gritty, realistic challenges of sudden role changes and these invisible culture clashes.
And the foundation for our analysis today is a really fascinating recorded conversation. It's between two seasoned professionals. The audio refers to them as Richard and Stanley.
Right, and they spend their time dissecting a real-life career crisis experienced by a mutual friend of theirs.
Exactly. This friend secured a fantastic project manager position at a foreign manufacturing firm, only to basically throw his hands up and prepare to walk away less than a year later.
Less than a year.
Yeah. And we are going to examine the exact anatomy of that breakdown today.
Which is wild. And that breakdown, it starts with a massive macroeconomic shockwave.
It really does.
When this professional was first hired, his mandate was incredibly clear. He was brought on specifically for new product development.
He had a very defined lane.
Exactly. He was functioning as this crucial bridge between the local operations and the overseas parent company's production units, highly structured manufacturing environment. But then the underlying economics of the whole business just shifted drastically.
And the source material specifically points to global trade politics as the catalyst here. They note tariffs implemented by the Trump administration. And to be clear for you listening, we are simply reporting the sequence of events as they're outlined in the source. We aren't taking any sort of political stance here. But the business reality those tariffs created is just stark.
It's totally paralyzing for a company.
Yeah, when international tariffs shift, that suddenly manufacturing pipelines just freeze. Clients who had anticipated certain cost structures, they're suddenly recalculating their entire budgets.
Anticipated projects just vanish into thin air.
Exactly.
And that structural freeze is what makes this specific case study so compelling to me. Because we often view global trade policy as this abstract concept, right? Like it only concerns chief executives or financial markets.
But here we see the immediate granular impact on one person's desk.
Right. The company anticipated a specific revenue stream from these new projects. When the tariff policy altered the landscape, that revenue projection just evaporated.
It backed the firm into a corner.
Right, forcing this drastic organizational restructuring.
And that restructuring cascades all the way down the corporate ladder until it lands squarely on the desk of an individual project manager.
Our guy.
Right. The company essentially tells this employee, hey, because there are no new products to manage, you are being reassigned to business development.
Which is huge. He is now tasked with hunting for new revenue and driving sales.
A completely different job.
But to play devil's advocate here for a second, isn't that just a standard survival mechanism for a company in crisis? Like, if the ship is sinking, everyone needs to grab a bucket.
Sure, you could argue that.
And the source even mentions that his initial offer letter contained a flexible clause. It stated that role adjustments could be made based on organizational needs upon mutual agreement.
And the presence of that clause is a really critical detail for you, the listener, to keep in mind during your own contract negotiations.
Definitely.
Because the employee actually agreed to try it. He attempted to be a team player and pivot into this BD role. But the crisis isn't simply the change in the job title.
No.
It is the psychological whiplash of moving from project management to sales. And honestly, the company's complete failure to manage that transition.
Let's explore that psychological whiplash, because the source places a very heavy emphasis on mindset over skill set here.
The overlapping skills are pretty obvious. Both roles demand excellent communication. Both require the ability to navigate complex interpersonal dynamics.
Right, talking to people, organizing things.
Yeah, but the insurmountable hurdle for this employee was entirely psychological.
Consider the fundamental difference in the operational frameworks of these two jobs. A project manager operates on a model of passive intake.
Yes.
The clients have already been secured, the contracts are signed, The trust has already been established by the sales team.
The project manager's function is just to execute within an established structure of authority. The work comes to you, and you ensure the timeline is met.
But business development flips that entirely. It is a model of active hunting.
You are no longer managing secured relationships. You are tasked with manufacturing trust from absolute zero.
The source frames it so brilliantly. They say, you transition from being a nobody trying to make the company an everybody.
That is such a good way to put it. In business development, you are operating at a constant deficit of trust.
Always.
You must proactively approach strangers. You have to face repeated rejection, push past indifference, and actually persuade people to invest capital.
Moving a professional from a position of established operational authority into a role that requires daily, aggressive vulnerability that is a monumental psychological leap.
And making that leap requires a structural safety net, which they didn't have.
No. And this employee was actually willing to give the new BD role a dedicated 6-month trial.
He was game.
He was prepared to put in the effort to rewire his professional mindset, provided the company gave him proper training.
But instead, management just handed him company profiles and marketing videos.
Literally just dumped videos on him.
Yeah. There was no walkthrough, no guidance on the value proposition, and absolutely no mentorship on how to pitch the company's strengths to new clients.
Throwing an employee into the deep end of a completely new profession with nothing but a glossy brochure, it just highlights a profound failure of management scaffolding.
It really does.
Yeah.
When an organization mandates a transition onto its talent due to external economic pressures, the burden of equipping that talent falls entirely on the organization.
Okay, pushing back slightly on the company's burden, though. If the organization is in a massive financial panic due to these sudden tariff implementations, do they realistically have the resources or the bandwidth to build a comprehensive 6-month sales training program from scratch?
That is a fair question, but it's really less about a formal, resource-heavy training program and more about setting realistic expectations and providing immediate tactical support.
Just something to work with.
Right. Even in a crisis, a manager can spend an hour mapping out the target client profile or conducting a quick mock pitch. Handing someone a YouTube link and expecting millions in revenue is an abdication of leadership, regardless of the economic climate.
And that abdication of leadership becomes even more apparent when we look at the specific incident that finally broke the employee's resolve.
This is the breaking point.
Right. Because the company's sales were lagging, again, stemming from those macroeconomic shifts, they initiated a period of intense performance reviews.
High stress for everyone.
Exactly. The direct manager demanded a comprehensive business development report from our professional. The employee compiled the data, wrote the report, submitted it, and received absolute silence.
Almost a full month passed without a single word of feedback.
From a management perspective, is a month of silence an intentional power play, or is it just structural incompetence?
In terms of workplace dynamics, silence from leadership is rarely interpreted by the employee as neutral. We have to view this through the lens of psychological safety.
Which was probably already pretty low.
Exactly. The employee is already in a highly vulnerable state. He's been forced into a role he wasn't hired for during a period of company-wide financial anxiety. Right. When a manager demands a report in that environment and then just ignores it, the employee's mental spiral is immediate and severe.
They are left wondering if the report was inadequate.
Or if they're failing at their new role entirely.
Or if their job is actively in jeopardy. You are essentially sitting in a vacuum, just spinning your wheels.
This read but completely ignored management style destroys whatever fragile motivation remains to make a difficult pivot work.
It's toxic.
Failing to acknowledge work you explicitly demanded during a high-stress period is a textbook method for eroding an employee's psychological safety.
But the source reveals a crucial piece of backstory that really frames this entire toxic dynamic. Hindsight makes this painfully obvious, but the red flags were actually waving during the initial job interview.
Yes, and this is perhaps the most vital takeaway for you as you navigate your own career trajectory.
During the interview process, the chairman of the company was highly impressed with this candidate, wanted him on board.
But the candidate's specific direct manager, the exact same manager who would later leave him on read for a month, provided negative feedback.
The direct manager actively did not want to hire him.
The employee was essentially a forced hire. The top executive overrode the objections of the middle manager.
And while securing the approval of the chairman feels like a massive victory during the recruitment phase,
it creates an immediate structural trap.
the friction is baked into the reporting line. before the employee even signs the contract.
You really have to pay clinical attention to the chemistry you share with your direct supervisor during the interview stage.
The executive suite might authorize your compensation, but your direct manager dictates your daily reality.
Exactly. If that relationship is fractured at inception, you are entering an environment where your manager has a vested interest in your failure, or at the very least, a subconscious bias against your success.
That dynamic totally explains the silent treatment. It wasn't just incompetence, it was a manifestation of that initial friction.
100%.
So we have a macroeconomic crisis. We have a forced psychological pivot, zero support scaffolding, and a manager who never wanted the employee in the first place.
Sounds like a nightmare.
Right. Yet Richard and Stanley point to something even deeper as the ultimate cause for the employee's departure. The true breaking point wasn't the workload or even just the manager. It was the invisible walls of corporate culture.
The clash between the structural reality of the foreign multinational and the employee's local expectations is where the situation finally becomes completely untenable.
We tend to project certain assumptions onto modern foreign enterprises. We assume they will operate with flat, agile, progressive cultures.
But the source material shatters that assumption entirely. It details a company with a shockingly rigid, labyrinthine hierarchy.
The anecdote provided in the source perfectly encapsulates this operational friction. It's almost hard to believe.
Really is.
Imagine needing to ask a brief tactical question to a peer stationed at one of the company's factories. Just a quick question. In a collaborative environment, you send an instant message or make a quick phone call. Simple.
In this company, direct communication with a peer was strictly prohibited.
The employee had to formally request permission from his manager.
And then his manager had to submit a formal request to the factory manager.
And only after the factory manager granted permission could the two peers actually speak.
It is a staggering operational bottleneck. It prioritizes the chain of command over basic efficiency.
Richard and Stanley used this specifically to launch into a deeply insightful cross-cultural analysis. They contrast the local Taiwanese and Chinese workplace dynamics with the foreign management style that was dominant in this specific firm.
The friction between these two cultural operating systems is fascinating. Let's break down how the source describes the local cultural baseline first.
Sure. The source characterizes the local workplace culture as one heavily rooted in mutual obligation. There is a strong tendency to be polite, accommodating, and deeply self-reflective.
In this environment, a leader is generally expected to model the behavior they demand. You require perfection of yourself before you enforce it upon your subordinates. Right. It is a high-context culture where harmony and collective responsibility carry significant weight.
The foreign management style, however, is described by the source using the term thick-skinned, which feels like a very loaded description.
Thick-skinned in this context refers to a management approach that operates entirely unburdened by that sense of mutual obligation.
Okay.
These managers were perfectly comfortable demanding intense output and rapid adaptability from their employees without feeling any pressure to model those traits themselves.
They did not engage in the self-reflection that the local culture prizes so highly.
Exactly. They relied purely on the leverage of their hierarchical power.
And that is the core of the conflict right there. You have an employee operating on a baseline of mutual obligation, trying to accommodate the company's pivot out of a sense of collective responsibility.
It's trying to be a team player.
Right, and the management, operating on a baseline of absolute authority, views that accommodation not as a favor to be reciprocated with training, but as compliance to be fully expected.
You cannot overstate the daily grinding exhaustion of trying to function across that specific cultural divide.
For you, the listener absorbing this, the real question becomes, how do you navigate an environment that was calcified long before you even arrived?
You have to make a start calculation. You cannot force a monolithic foreign corporate culture to adopt your local norms or your personal communication preferences.
It's just not going to happen.
No. You either contort yourself to fit their rigid hierarchy and thick-skinned management style, or you accept the incompatibility.
Our professional clearly accepted the incompatibility and decided to walk away. The case study Richard and Stanley laid out leaves us with an incredible amount to process. Let's consolidate the core insights we have extracted today.
The first major takeaway is the absolute velocity with which global macroeconomic events can alter an individual career.
International tariffs are not just newspaper headlines. They are mechanisms that can rewrite your job description overnight. Professional agility is mandatory.
Second, The transition from managing existing projects to hunting for new business is not a lateral skill transfer.
Not at all.
It is a fundamental psychological rewiring. Moving from a position of established trust to a position of active vulnerability requires immense support. And if a company fails to provide that scaffolding, the transition will likely fail.
Third, never dismiss the red flags during the recruitment process. If your prospective direct manager signals resistance to your hiring, pay attention.
Ignoring a fundamental lack of alignment with the person who will control your daily tasks is a critical error, regardless of the brand name on the building.
Finally, we have to acknowledge the immense weight of corporate culture. You cannot individually dismantle a rigid hierarchy or bridge a massive gap in communication styles through sheer willpower.
It's worth noting that Richard, one of the speakers in the source, actually provides cross-cultural consulting precisely because these clashes are so systemic and complex.
Which brings us to the ultimate application for you, the listener. A lucrative offer from a prestigious foreign brand requires relentless, upfront due diligence.
You must investigate the actual granular culture of the team you're joining. Understand the power dynamics.
Do not chronically compromise your own operational boundaries if the environment fundamentally conflicts with how you produce your best work.
That is a phenomenal synthesis.
Before we close this deep dive, there is a lingering, highly provocative thought embedded in the source material's conclusion that we really need to address.
It frames the entire narrative in a very different light.
We have spent this session breaking down the structural failures the employee faced. The tariffs destroyed his pipeline, the forced pivot was entirely unsupported, the manager ignored his work, and the culture was suffocating.
His decision to resign feels entirely justified.
It does. However, the source poses a challenging question. By walking away when the friction peaked, did he actually abandon a massive opportunity for personal and professional growth?
It really forces us to question the line between protecting your boundaries and avoiding necessary discomfort.
I want to direct this challenge to you. Place yourself in that exact scenario. You are confronted with a sudden, difficult shift into sales, a manager who refuses to engage, and a culture that demands permission for basic communication. What is your move?
Do you dig in, force a change in your own mindset, and attempt to conquer a hostile environment?
Or do you recognize a toxic ecosystem for what it is, pack up your desk, and preserve your peace of mind? Take some time to think about where you draw that line. We will catch you on the next deep dive.